Han minister for skotske spørsmål under en statsminister, Boris Johnson, som sliter med lav oppslutning blant skotske velgere. Alister Jack, som fyller dette vervet, skal utvikle Skottland utenfor EU og innenfor den britiske unionen. Det et arbeid i motvind i en gammel institusjon og med nye utfordringer, kan man trygt si. Mitt navn Øivind Bratberg. Velkommen til denne episoden av Pod Britannia, hvor vi skal snakke med Alister Jack, statsråd for skotske spørsmål, og på Oslo-besøk denne uken.
We shall never surrender.
The pride in who we are is not a part of our past. It defines our present and our future.
The people of Scotland have spoken.
England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, together, taking us forward, unleashing the potential of the whole country.
Før vi starter denne podcasten skal vi gi et aldri så lite bakteppe til det hele. Alister Jack altså statsråd for skotske spørsmål, Skottland-minister, kall det hva du vil. Han leder et eget departement i den britiske sentraladministrasjonen i London, som altså skal forholde seg til Skottland og hjelpe å forvalte Skottland. Det ingen enkel oppgave, ikke minst fordi skottene selv har sitt parlament og sin førsteminister, Nicola Sturgeon, og hennes regjering i Edinburgh, som til dels sterkt uenig i hva London foreskriver av politikk, og hvor det også en viss overlapp mellom ansvarsområdene i de to hovedstedene, hvis vi kan kalle det det. Så hører det med til historien at Alister Jack en av 6 parlamentsrepresentanter fra det konservative partiet valgt fra Skottland. Der de i betydelig undertall i møte med de 46 representantene fra det skotske nasjonalistpartiet SNP, som også bekler benkene i House of Commons i London. Et arbeid i motbakke kan man tenke, samtidig som Alister Jack representerer den britiske regjeringen med all dens tyngde fra London og med alle dens ambisjoner og verktøy som skal bidra til å holde Storbritannia samlet og suksessrikt. Denne uken besøkte Alister Jack Oslo og Bergen i en rundreise hvor han også har besøkt Finland samme uke. Hans oppdrag å representere britiske interesser utad, men med et særlig øye for Skottland. Vi møtte ham til intervju i den britiske ambassadørens residens. All right. Secretary of State, thanks for taking part in this podcast. I'll start by simply asking about the post that you hold. It is a peculiar one if one is not acquainted with the system of British government, to have a separate Secretary of State for Scotland and a ministry entitled the Scotland Office. What precisely does that entail?
So, rather like the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland or Wales, I represent Scotland in the United Kingdom government. So I sit in the Prime Minister's cabinet and I speak up for Scotland, particularly on the matters that are reserved. So reserved areas would be, for instance, work and pensions, defence. There are a range of other, obviously foreign affairs come into it, but there are a range of other things that were not devolved at the time, and the international trade would be another example, and obviously that's been part of this trip. So those are matters that are reserved to Westminster, and I am Scotland's man, in this case, in the Westminster government and the cabinet.
Which means, in a sense, that you're Scotland's representative in cabinet, but also the cabinet's representative in Scotland, in a sense.
Yes, I think that's a very fair way of putting it. And obviously, you know, when it comes to, for instance, the funding and the furlough scheme we've had recently as we've gone through the COVID pandemic, I am fighting for Scotland and Scottish jobs, and that's exactly as it should be. There should be a strong voice for Scotland within the Westminster government, but also it's if you're the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions or Defence, you will also have a remit that covers Scotland because these matters are reserved. But it's important that the Scottish dynamic the case is pressed with those ministers by me.
The post of Scottish Secretary or Secretary of State for Scotland has a fairly long prehistory. It dates all the way back to the 1880s, I believe.
Yes.
Although
and we've always been at Dover House, looking onto Horse Guards parade ground in Whitehall. We've had the same office throughout all that period, and it's an iconic building. It's one we're very proud of.
A long and glorious history it is too, but it is also a history that has changed profoundly over the last couple of decades, given the creation of a Scottish Parliament, operative from 1999 onwards. Can you say a few words about how devolution to Scotland has changed the role that you perform as a minister representing the UK government vis-à-vis Scotland?
Well, I wasn't involved in politics back in fact, I've only been involved in politics since 2017. So certainly back in 1999, when the Scottish Parliament was established, it was the Scotland Act in 1998 that set up the Scottish Parliament. And the Secretary of State before then would have had more ministers, and the matters devolved, like health and education, would have been the responsibility of the Secretary of State, who would have had an office. He obviously had the office at Dover House in Whitehall, I've mentioned, but he also would have operated out of an office in Edinburgh. Now, we have an office in Edinburgh. We have, believe it or not, there are 12 Whitehall departments that are represented there. So Scotland has two governments still, and whether it's transport, international trade, as I said, foreign aid, foreign affairs, defence, etc., all those departments, we tie them together at our sort of hub in Edinburgh, but the coordination is done by my office, and so my role is still one that reaches out, as I say, to work with 12 Whitehall departments that have this footprint in Scotland.
This also means that you do have to work in tandem with a Scottish government in Edinburgh, which is currently composed of the Scottish National Party, a party that would like to seek independence from the UK. Could you spell out in a few words the kind of challenges that this generates for your work and for your post?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And of course, when the Scottish Parliament was created by the Labour Party back in 1997, with a large majority they had at the time, and then there was a referendum, they established the Parliament not necessarily believing that one day there might be a separatist government in that Parliament, and we're now in that position. So we have a government in Scotland that wants to leave the United Kingdom, and my job, along with the Prime Minister and others, is to strengthen the United Kingdom. So we're in a very unusual dynamic that we have now, and it is challenging, but our position is very clear. We believe that Scotland's two governments should work together, and that's entirely what we seek to do. We want to be collaborative for the good of the Scottish economy. We've obviously had the challenge of the pandemic. We had a very successful vaccine program, and we saved lives. And we now think it's important to save livelihoods by our levelling up agenda, by our union connectivity review, where we want to improve transport links in Scotland, because we know better transport links leads to more economic activity, and more economic activity is better for people's jobs, and higher skilled jobs, higher wages. So our agenda is levelling up. It's getting structural funds out across the United Kingdom as locally as possible. We're doing that through local authorities, so that it's going best to where those local authorities know that money can be spent. They present the business cases. My office works with the Treasury and the Department for Levelling Up to approve those bids. And our job, as I say, is to work as collaboratively as we can with the Scottish National Party and the Scottish Government to get the best economic outcome for Scotland.
So getting the Scots on board with regard to the British Union is a sort of an ongoing work, but you also need to get Scots on board with regard to leaving the European Union. And one of the chief aims of the current UK government is to make Brexit work. What does that mean for Scotland? What does it imply to make Brexit work for Scotland?
Well, we have to be very mindful that what we're trying to do as we make Brexit work is to get one of the primary objectives is to have good trade deals outside the EU. Obviously, the trade and cooperation agreement with the EU is critically important, and there was much concern about that in Scotland. But the numbers for separation started to diminish. The polling reduced for separation once we had that agreement in place on Christmas Eve, December 2020. Now we're in a place where we're looking to do trade deals with, for instance, with New Zealand. We've been successful there. Australia. We want to go into the comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a huge market. It will be the largest free trade zone in the world, and we want to create. We know there's huge opportunities and benefits, and this is through a lot of analysis that's been done by the Department for International Trade, that there are huge benefits for Scottish food and drink, for instance, and obviously our service sector, and we want to use this opportunity to increase our trade with the rest of the world. And if you look at Scotland in particular, 60% of Scotland's trade is with the rest of the United Kingdom, 19% is with the European Union, and 21% with the rest of the world. Well, we want to enhance our trade with the European Union. That figure of 19% is a pre-Brexit figure, so we want to build on that. But we also want to build on the rest of the world figure, and particularly, as you're outside the EU, I would include Norway in that context. We want to do more trade with Norway. We're already a big trading partner for you, and we want to do more joint ventures. There's lots to do in the green space, possibly in the space sector, oil and gas, which the UK government is a great supporter still of the oil and gas industry, and a just transition. We want to do all those things, and we want to work with the Nordic countries, and particularly with Norway.
And indeed, you're on a trip this week to enhance and strengthen those ties between the UK and Norway. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what particular aspects relate to Scotland here when it comes to strengthening the ties between the UK and Norway. What kind of particularities do we need to look for in Scotland? What are the chief sources of unfulfilled potential that need to be worked on?
Well, we've got a history of working together that goes back for not just decades but centuries, and we now have opportunities in, as I say, in the green sector, renewables, in waste management. We've got a great history with, for instance, the Norwegians coming to Scottish universities, to Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh has always attracted a lot of Norwegians. We want more young Norwegians to engage, and we want to do more, more collaborative work together. I think that's, the opportunities are there. It's just as technology changes, and as I say, we have this transition in oil and gas. We will never move away from oil and gas. By 2050, I think 20% of our energy still comes from gas and 15% from oil, and the oil in part of that's about the petrochemical industry and making instruments for the National Health Service and those sort of things. So there's an importance there that people have to understand. But we can look to what, for instance, what you've done with Hydro, and we've done with Hydro. We can look at other tie-ups that would be helpful, and then of course there's the defence sector. The world is a very uncertain place, particularly more so with the developments over the last few weeks in Ukraine. We want to continue to work, as we've always done, very closely with you as a partner on defence, and obviously we'd like to build you a few frigates on the Clyde and on the Forth.
On that specific somber note about the military issues, we speak against the backdrop of the war in Ukraine and a really sinister international context. Could you say a few words about the significance of Scotland in military terms and security terms within the UK? How important is Scottish territory and its military components as part of the UK? So
incredibly important. On the defence sector, we have, obviously I mentioned the shipbuilding on the Clyde and the Forth at Rosyth, but we have our nuclear deterrent is based on the Clyde at Faslane. Scotland has always more than pulled her weight in producing service personnel for the British Armed Forces. So, Scotland is deeply embedded in our armed forces, and actually, as a father of a son in the British Army, that's more than clear to me, and I think that Scots understand that. They understand the strength that we get from being together, and the great things that our armed forces do, not only overseas with humanitarian aid, but also at home. When we went through the COVID pandemic, time and time again, the armed forces stepped up, whether it was running vaccine centres, whether it was running testing centres, delivering PPE. There was many times the armed services helped us get through the pandemic, and we hold them in deep affection, and not just in Scotland but throughout the United Kingdom.
You obviously speak on behalf of the unionist side. You speak for the Conservative Party, but also on behalf of keeping the UK together. And it's no secret that in Scotland the dividing line over nationalism versus unionism tends to overshadow other political debates. And from the outside, one often gets the impression that this is an ongoing, ever-going debate that is unlikely to disappear. What kind of Scotland do you envisage, say, 20 years down the line? Will this still be the dominant issue, or will sort of the British Union be able to forge closer, more profound and stable political climate in Scotland?
I mean, the British government is very much about strengthening the United Kingdom, and I think as we move further away from Brexit, which was obviously a big moment in terms of the relationship between Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom, because if you look at the percentages on the Brexit vote, as that's further in the rearview mirror, as we move into our trade deals, with the response we've seen to the pandemic, there was over £14 billion of extra support went into Scotland. There was a furlough scheme that supported over 900,000 jobs. People are seeing the benefits of being part of the United Kingdom. And we also have now, if you like, third-party actors asking questions in Scotland about what currency an independent Scotland would have, or how pensions would be paid, how the border would work between England and Scotland, which, as I've said, the rest of the United Kingdom, 60% of Scotland's trade. All of those things are in people's minds, and they because the nationalists have sought to press on with a desire for a second independence referendum, that has encouraged commentators to write about these things. And we're seeing the numbers, we believe, for wanting a referendum reducing, wanting one in the next year, wanting one in the next 3 years. The numbers are in the 20s%, and the numbers wanting independence are in the minority. And I hope that by showing the strength of the United Kingdom and the great things we can do when we're united and working together, we'll keep pushing the figures for, as I say, us all holding, being stronger together.
Alister Jack, thanks very much for taking part in this interview.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We shall never surrender.
The pride in who we are is not a part of our past. It defines our present and our future.
The people of Scotland have spoken.
England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, together, taking us forward, unleashing the potential of the whole country.
Order!